Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on back to another episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. No, that thumbnail and that title of the thumbnail are not clickbait. What I stated actually happened. Russia did indeed attack freaking the British consulate over inside of Kiev, it would appear. Like, bomb the crap out of it twice. Like, it's not like they made a mistake here. You know, like, it was an intentional strike on that building. And, no kidding, it definitely appears as if Israel conducted a parachute operation, airborne operation into Syria to take out Turkish intelligence equipment that had been spying on Israel for like the last freaking 10 years, Israel claims. And they warned Turkey and they warned Syria, don't do this crap. We are stronger than you realize. All of that, ladies and gentlemen, and so much more is going to be coming up on today's episode. I couldn't believe some of the things that I saw. I was like, this is an act of war. This is not something that you do. That is like sovereign freaking, like you have actual citizens working inside of that building, and they whacked the crap out of it. And you better believe I got footage of that coming up. Now, before we get into all that stuff, as I wait on people to get in here, we're all about putting out random information from time to time about things that are happening over here in the United States of America. And you guys, these random things happen to be facts, and they happen to be things that affect you on a daily basis. So if that's something that you enjoy, having honest assessments of different things that are taking place around the world that, generally speaking, mainstream media avoids, maybe you should consider subscribing to the channel. Here's an example. House Oversight Committee, all right, decided it would be a good idea to write Wikipedia. Why? Because they're curious whether or not Wikipedia is putting out false information about what's going on around the world, specifically in the Israel-Gaza conflict, saying that some of their people that are editing on Wikipedia, some of their volunteers, are going directly against Wikipedia's rules. And it seems like Wikipedia is ignoring all of this stuff, i.e. Wikipedia is trying to control the narrative for what is taking place, and the United States government is a little bit upset about it. Can't make that crap up. You see the date right there, August 27th, 2025. This actually came out yesterday. I'm not even going to bother giving you guys a full reading of it. Yesterday, when that shooting ended up, taking place, I told you guys to kind of hold off on, I told you guys to kind of hold off. And this is why. What I'm about to put up on your screen here. Here we have, I believe it's 22 instances over the last month or so of all of these freaking, it's not even last month, it's like 2 weeks, of all of these false reports for active shooters that have been called in at different universities and different campuses in the United States. And I believe we got some from Canada on here as well, but mostly focused over here inside of the United States. So why is this happening? Like, what's going on here? They've been called in Colorado, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, right? All of this stuff is going off, and people are calling these things in, having the police respond. They're essentially swatting universities with active shooter calls and active shooter threats or bomb threats and things of that nature. Why would they do that? In my opinion, is to desensitize people to any active shooter attacks or anything like that may be coming up. Now, right before we go ahead and move into this main segment, I want to let you guys know that Putin came out with another excuse for what's going on. He's now blaming the West for starting the war in Ukraine. So he says the West started the war in Ukraine, forcing Russia to launch a special military operation.
Там пропаганда, конечно, работает, мозги промывают и говорят о том, что вы начали войну, и забывают о том, что они сами начали войну.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Thanks, Putin. Really enjoyed that statement from you. That really makes sense. Over there in the West, propaganda, of course, works. They brainwash people and they say that we started the war, while forgetting that they themselves started the war. And then there you have Putin talking about him declaring the special military operation, sitting there because he's just a really good guy. Well, you know what Putin left out of his narrative is how he violated the Budapest Memorandum several different times by interfering with the Ukrainian elections, where he got caught doing that. He also ended up violating it when he crossed the border and went into Ukraine, annexed Crimea, crossed the border, went to the Donbass region for 7 8 years before he decided to launch his special military operation, never really admitting that they were over there doing that, regardless of the fact that we had Russian soldiers posting on frickin' Facebook and other different social media platforms showing their locations, like literally leaving the metadata on their photos, which allowed us to geolocate and track them over into the Donbass prior to all of this happening. But according to Putin, It's the West's fault. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's all about the West. And we're all brainwashed idiots. Well, let's go take a look at these strikes that are taking place overnight inside of Kiev. Russia launched a massive attack on Kiev. And like I said, it ended up striking British consulate building. You've got multiple dead and dozens wounded. We're still waiting on the final tally of all that to come in. One thing's for dang sure, they definitely struck the British consulate building, and they did it several times. Check this out. Look at that. That is just a random structure sitting over there in the middle of Kiev, which they decide to go ahead and frickin' bomb. That's one hell of an angle, like as you look at it and see all of this going on. And this is what Ukraine is dealing with on a daily basis. There is a second round that ended up jumping in and impacting that certain one right there. I'm seeing people telling me that my audio is a little messed up. Let me see if I can't solve that. I don't know why my audio would be messed up. It shouldn't be. People are telling me that I'm 5x. So if for some reason you guys think my audio is messed up, let me know. Maybe that made it a little bit better. Let me check it on my end because I don't want you guys to think that I got it checked. Round that ended up jumping in and impact. No, my audio seems perfectly okay. I have no idea what it is that everybody's complaining about. I don't know why my audio would be messed up. It shouldn't be. People are telling me that I'm 5x. So if for some reason you guys think my audio is nope, it's good to go. I can hear it just fine on my end. Audio sounds great. So I don't know what anybody's complaining about. Yeah, it's YouTube. Maybe just go ahead and restart everything, and then I'll help you out. Your voice is breaking up. Go ahead and try restarting it because audio sounds perfectly good on my end where it's coming through, ladies and gentlemen. So go ahead and restart it. Freaking volume deniers, man. You guys are always all over the place. All right, let's take a look at it from this angle. Let's check this strike out. This is probably one of the most, I don't know, shocking angles of these strikes that took place over inside Kiev. Look at this. Wait for it. Boom. You actually see that round, right? Like end up striking and then another, like a portion of it just ripping right through and going right back down there. I'm going to rewind it a little bit for you guys to watch. And I'm going to slow it down to like 75% speed so you guys can see this. You guys see that right there? That's insane. Absolutely nuts. And this is what's going on in Kiev. This is what happened. You see the time on the camera right there, 5:40 a.m. All right, that was this morning over inside of Kiev. The place was getting rocked. I got told that it is just loud as hell, and they're still picking up pieces trying to figure out what the heck was going on. Watch this. It's nuts. Absolutely insane. Boom. Boom. All that going up over, whacking into residential buildings. What's the targets? Very good question. I mean, I really wish, the West would force the Kremlin to come out and state that this is what's going on, right? I really wish that the West would state, demand that Russia come out and say that we are striking these targets for this particular reason. Looks like an airburst blast. No, that's like a partial hit, right? Like it skimmed through the target or it blasted right through the target. And so I wish I could tell you, but here's one of the targets. We know this for dang sure.
So this building behind me is the British Council, and they basically support peace and prosperity between Ukraine and the United Kingdom. And it's been destroyed by a Russian missile this morning. And this building regularly, on a daily basis, contains British government staff, British employees, and the Russians know that. And the Russians decided to put a missile into this street at the early hours of this morning. And moments like this should wake people up in the United Kingdom that Russia isn't just at war with Ukrainians, they're at war with everybody in the West. They were perfectly happy to hit this building, and they'll be perfectly happy to hit buildings like it continuously. And if you look around at this street, there are no military targets. This is a residential street filled with people sleeping, children sleeping, and again, the British government building. So this building.
So again, where is the demands for Russia to own up to these targets? Where is the demands for Russia to come out and say, this is what ended up happening. This is why we struck this target. We went after it because we have intelligence that says that the Ukrainian military is using that building in some way, or the Brits are doing this and they're going after them. But we don't hear it. We don't. We're not hearing any of that. We don't get a single word out of the Kremlin. We don't get a single word out of Russia telling us why the hell they're bombing these civilian structures. And if you don't believe that they are doing a good job at it, I got plenty of angles for you. All right. This is where the international community really needs to come in. Doesn't look like the building actually took a direct hit. I haven't found any reporting saying that it ended up taking a direct strike. But yeah, what the heck was your target? Take a look at that. Look right there. Look how jacked up the front face of that building is. Take a good look at that sucker. And nobody is demanding that Russia come out and answer for this. Why? Why not? Where is it? It's shocking, to be perfectly honest with you, that this is taking place. Because you know dang good and well, if this happened in Gaza, if we ended up seeing stuff like this taking place over inside of frickin' Gaza, that we would hear about it. You'd have like a joint UN draft resolution for how to solve this problem and demanding to know what the hell's going on and how dare they start committing genocide over in the middle of it. You know what I mean? Like, why? Where is this? Like, why are they not speaking out against this? Check this out. Boom. There's one. Wait for it. Here comes a second. Again, smashed right down in the middle of the street. Pretty dang clear what the hell they were aiming for. They are just dang lucky that they ended up missing that sucker. Yeah, clearly that's exclusive footage obtained by the Telegraph because I wasn't able to just go find the original source of that either, right? So, you know, you gotta love news stations when they come out with that, like trying to make themselves feel special. Hey, this is exclusive footage brought to you by Speak the Truth. No, not how it works. Mike Silva says they don't speak out because they don't speak the truth and they're cowards. Yeah, you freaking nailed it. A lot of them are cowards and they're afraid of standing up against something that's not, it's basically not popular to stand up and state these things. It's not okay anymore to stand up and state all of this crap. You know, years ago when Russia launched their invasion over in Ukraine, I remember driving through frickin' Dallas and just watching, I don't even know, like the entire Dallas skyline, arguably one of the most beautiful skylines of like any major metropolitan area, is just lit up in like gold and blue. You had buildings that were decorated, like it was insane, right? And it was all over the place, like all sorts of support. But now, all of a sudden, it's no longer popular to bring it up, regardless of stuff like this taking place. Look at that. As a direct hit, you guys see that hole in the side of that train? That's a direct hit on that civilian transport. Direct hit on the civilian transport. Now, one could ask whether or not this is a message that's being sent by Russia to the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians have been going after Russian supply lines. They've been taking out like different trains, logistical trains and things like that are shipping in fuel that are going towards the war effort. They're striking legitimate military targets over inside of the Donbass, going after and striking Russian military efforts. And they've been doing it for quite some time. Right, going after those trains that are working the way into the into the Donbass. Actually, I'm talking about into the Donbass, but also more appropriately down into Zaporizhia, right, like where they were going into. And then we have this direct hit on a freaking train. Now, again, the casualty count for this has yet to come out, so we don't know the exact figures of how many. All right, people have been killed or wounded in this, but it is very obvious that this is going to be yet another high casualty count over inside of Ukraine. Civilian casualties. Incog Faraday coming and giving out 5 Speak the Truth memberships. Oh my goodness. Doc Hook says, only got 15 minutes till I have to drop and do my own stream. Well, Doc, thank you for hanging out with us until then and going over some of this stuff that's taking place, because this type of crap is another view. Now, I want to remind everybody that this is taking place pretty much a week after the largest privately owned U.S. company inside of Ukraine, one that's traded on the NASDAQ, takes up like 5.4, if my memory serves me correctly, 5.4 square kilometers. It's all the way out in the west of Ukraine, ended up taking direct hits from Russian munitions as well. So last week, we have Russia go over and target U.S.-based companies, ones that's so large it's being traded on the NASDAQ, creates coffee and crock pots, a lot of plastic mold-injected crap, right? Probably stuff that you end up buying on frickin' like Amazon, like eBay, Temu. I don't frickin' know. It's not like it is like this massive frickin' war machine that's over there. And there is zero evidence at this point that they have produced any. I did the background research. Texas and we dove deep because we're like, dude, Russia had to have targeted that building for a reason. Then we remembered, oh, wait. United States was pushing to have this whole like peace deal going on. We were pressuring Putin into making these things happen. All of this crap was going on. Brits are also at the forefront of this. And we're all, United States, Canada, UK, Germany, everybody is now getting behind Ukraine and pledging support going over towards them because Putin and Russia are refusing to come to the table in any sort of a peace deal. And now what we are starting to see is we are starting to see U.S., now British. I'm waiting for something German to get frickin' blown up. I'm just waiting for the news to come out that some German something got frickin' blown up because the Germans pledged $2 billion worth of support going over to Ukraine. As a buttload of frickin' military support that's going to be going in there. And what Russia is doing, it certainly appears, is systematic targeting of Ukraine's allies, and not just Ukraine allies, but Ukraine ally civilian structures over inside of Ukraine. It is absolutely appalling. I want to see the UK come out and demand that Russia answer for this crap. U.S. barely touched on it last week. I mean, we barely touched on it last week, screaming, why would you hit this factory, right? I think maybe a lot of politicians were going, who knows, man? Maybe there was something shady going on there. What we're talking about here, the consulate, dude, they don't do anything. You're talking about like processing visa paperwork, things of that nature, right? You're talking about like helping people out with like different language and everything else. The Doggedy Git show says Zelensky did it. Right, because Russia would never purposely do this, right? Russia would never do anything like this. They would never invade a foreign country. They would never launch a freaking illegal invasion. They would never annex like Crimea. They would never do anything like that. They would never lie about being in the Donbass. They would never lie about shooting down a commercial airliner, regardless of the fact that we've got CCTV footage that captures the Buk missile system flying in. The commercial airliner was flying at like 35,000 feet when it got shot out of the sky. Right? And that's not something that like a regular shoulder fired freaking weapon like a Stinger can take down. Those things max out at about 20,000 feet AGL. So all of those are pretty much ruled out. So then you go into like a crew served weapon system that Russia has, they only have. God forbid they accept that. God forbid they accept that they were responsible for all of that crap. God forbid they accept and talk about all of the massacres and the butchering and everything that took place over inside of Bucha. God forbid they come out and they like after Ukraine was clearing them out and we end up finding like the torture chambers and things like that Russia had. God forbid we actually pay attention to that. God forbid we pay attention to the chemical weapons that Russia has deployed on the front lines over inside of Ukraine that are very well documented. Russia would never do anything like that, right? They're perfectly honest. They would tell you exactly how well they are set up over there. They would tell you that they are dominating the front line, that they don't need to do any of that crap, that all of this is just Ukrainian propaganda, that this is just somehow the West pushing a narrative. Like, do you honestly, like, do they honestly think that you are that stupid? They shot down a commercial airliner, for crying out loud, ladies and gentlemen. Hell, they shot down their own. Not that long ago, like months ago. And this keeps happening. And you don't think that they could have done it over the Donbass? That's insane, right? They can't even accept the fact that they ended up getting pushed all the way back to the present day line. They can't accept the fact that they have zero freaking like economy right now over inside of the Donbass, down in freaking Zaporizhia, down in freaking Crimea. They want to push like this one-sided narrative. Oh, by the way, let's not talk about the human trafficking issues that were occurring. Even though last week I ended up showing a video of a Russian lady talking about taking a 1-year-old child out of Kherson and how happy and she is her solnichka, like the joy of her frickin' life, right? Her sunshine. It is absurd. absolutely absurd that nobody's talking about this crap. Why? Because they go and they throw out their own propaganda. Oh, look at all these Ukrainian Nazis. You know, I was actually really thankful, even though I make it a point to make sure that anybody that's labeled was a violent sexual predator by a court of law that ended up blocking them. I was actually really thankful that I was able to like debate Scott Ritter the other day, because what I was able to do is I was able to actually hear the Russian objectives, like what Russia actually thinks, right? Because you know, he just got back from freaking Russia like a week ago or something like that, ended up going down to Crimea, said that he'd been on the front lines, talking with commanders, things of that nature, and he's talked to the generals and he knows exactly where they're at and what they're thinking. And one of the things that he labeled out, what denazification for them actually meant, wasn't killing all of the perceived Nazis that are over inside of Ukraine, which we can touch on here in a little bit. I mean, the U.S. has frickin' skinheads. It doesn't mean that we are a Nazi country. That's ridiculous. It meant literally replacing the government and Russia controlling the Ukrainian government. That's what it means by that. That's what that denazification means coming out of his mouth. When it goes down to demilitarization, they want to have a force of, like, they only want Ukraine to have about like 60,000 strong. Now, where do you think that came from? Polish Drunk coming in with $4.99. He says, is Russia striking in American businesses the other day and now the British Council a pressure test from the West from Putin? Yes. That's exactly what that is, man. That is exactly what it is. This is not a mistake. You don't make this mistake. You don't fire freaking, like, whatever freaking munition this was that ended up going in there. We're going to hear about it. We're going to figure it out. The UK is not going to take this crap. Well, they shouldn't. UK has taken a lot of crap in the past, but this they shouldn't take. Russia needs to answer for this. You know, we even got word when Israel ended up bombing the freaking, you know, consulate building over inside of Syria that the PIJ was meeting up with members of the IRGC. At least we know that is a reason for why it ended up getting smashed. That is not a consular activity. Show me this stuff taking place, Russia. Give us your intelligence that this is actually what was going down at this building. Where is it? Where is your intelligence on that U.S. company that you ended up striking last week, putting 5,000 employees out of freaking work? I think it was 5,000 or 2,000 employees out of work. Where is it? Where is your intel? Where is your information that says these are the different things that are going on? Because until then, you are striking civilian structures and you are committing war crimes on a massive freaking scale. And for some reason, the world is ignoring this. The Brits should be absolutely pissed off. Absolutely livid that occurred. I don't know if I need to, maybe I do need to play that video again and show you guys exactly like how freaking accurate and dang close these strikes ended up coming. Take a look. Look at how close this is. Look at that. Not one, but two. Not just one, but two. Where is all of the people screaming last week, which, by the way, I can't wait to get into this because now I have undeniable evidence that Hamas was using the Nasser hospital. Undeniable. I'm going to share that with you guys here in just a little bit. Undeniable evidence Hamas was using the Nasser hospital. But people are screaming, double tapping is a war crime. It's not. But double tapping a civilian structure without actual intel on it, that is a war crime. Shooting civilians one time is a war crime. Shooting civilians multiple times is definitely a war crime. Purposely targeting peaceful civilian structures, that's a war crime. You'll see this on the Newsmat 100%. Really, you think so? I don't know about that one. Patrick Loud says, I imagine Russia grooms Ritter, knowing he will come over here and be a mouthpiece for them. Thanks for reminding me about Ritter, Pat, because here's the next thing I'm going to put out. He brought up denazification and then demilitarization of Ukraine. He wants their force to be reduced down to 60,000. Excuse me, that's the Kremlin stance. They're going to reduce the Ukrainian force down to 60,000 troops. That's what they want. in addition to the denazification. I'm very curious. I'd have to look it up. I got a feeling the figure's going to be dang close. Do you know, like, after World War II, that was one of the things the United States and, like, our allies ended up doing? I'm going to grab this figure real quick. I got a feeling it's really close. I'm going to pull this figure for you guys and bring it up because after World War II, Germany, right, their military was required to have like a certain number. Like they couldn't go over a certain freaking number, right? And all of this stuff ended up coming out. Yeah. So in August 30th of 1945, Germany was allowed to have 0 troops. Following denazification, actual denazification of Germany, they were allowed to have 0 troops. Going towards the 1950s, right? Going towards the 1950s, Germany was then allowed in 54 and 55 to have 500,000 total personnel. That's it. Actual Bundeswehr was restructured with about 12 divisions or 240,000 troops that they had initially planned. Air Force and Navy sized it to fit within the 500,000 ceiling. 180,000 in the 80s. I mean, we capped them. They were only allowed to have so many. And that, to me, appears to be exactly what Russia's doing. They're taking old stuff from World War II and coming out and saying, no, this is where you're going to be at. But Nazi Germany was allowed to have freaking 500,000 for crying out loud afterwards, right? I guess it wasn't Nazi Germany because it had collapsed, right? But they were allowed to have 500,000. And yet Putin is sitting here saying Ukraine needs to only have 60,000. That's freaking nuts. Doc Hook says, check Discord and X, demand answer from the U.S. government. I quoted your tweet, Tardio, so it'll be easy to find. See y'all tonight. Hey, thanks, Doc. Appreciate you, brother. See you tonight, my friend. It's insane. That's what they're doing. And again, you have 2 direct strikes on this consulate. Boom. Council building. Brits call it. It's unacceptable. Let's continue on with this little shindig because I think I've made my point about Russia targeting civilian structures. No, I didn't. Here's some more damage.
І стовп покосився. І провода висять. І дорогу тільки ремонтували. Ой-ой-ой. А тут каміння лежить. Да, так не дуже тут.
That's insane. Like, take a good, solid look at that. Again, where's our military targets? Where's the military structures of everything going down? And I understand that these are camera angles and like what's outside of the camera, might necessarily tell might tell a different tale. But these are just people that are driving around like surveying the damage, right? This isn't coming from the Ukrainian government. This isn't being put out by like a Ukrainian, like pro-Ukrainian news outlet. You can hear the guy in the background, like, what the hell, And this isn't like it's like over in Gaza where they're known for producing fake videos and everything else. It's absolutely sad. Why is Russia getting pissed off? Well, their oil supply is getting drastically depleted. I mean, huge. Their overall production has dropped over 20% just because of strikes that have been taking place. Here is a strike that took place yesterday, right, on a Russian pipeline. It was like overnight going in. The Ukraine ended up striking yet another pipeline and bringing it down. And that is just kind of like the start of it, all right? And then last night, all right, they ended up going and freaking striking a major freaking oil site that ends up dropping it another 4.7%. Russia's oil production, it dropped 4.7% overnight because of these drone strikes that were taking place. By the way, Ukraine launched a massive drone wave over inside of Crimea, right? And so right now, one of the major concerns that Putin has and a lot of the Western leaders and NATO and everything else that's going around is, should we allow, oil is a legitimate target, Michael. You are correct. This is directly impacting the Russian war effort. These are legitimate military targets during a time of war. And let's not forget, Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. These are 100% legitimate military targets, unlike the consul that ended up getting struck over in Kiev, unlike the American company that's being traded on the NASDAQ. Unlike those things, these are legitimate military targets. You don't hear me complaining when Russia ends up taking out a Ukrainian freaking ammunition depot, other than great. Now we got to figure out how to get that sucker back up and running, right? These right here are legitimate military targets. Over 4% reduction yet again. And that sucker is burning and it's freaking on fire. All right. This is the Kubyshev oil refinery over in Samara.
Прям.
This is day after.
Бля, буду в столб. Но ясен хуй. Бах. Все, пизда. Вот это тряхануло. Вот это знатненько было.
Oh, yeah.
Давай, в столбик прям. Бля, буду в столб. Но ясен хуй. Бах.
And what's amazing about that video is you can actually see their like anti-aircraft fire that's going over and trying to target that drone as it's on its way in. But obviously they end up missing. So like, how ill-equipped are the Russians to deal with this? It's funny because we often hear about like how technologically advanced the Russians are and how much they're just crushing Ukraine. The fact is that these strikes are being conducted by and large without the help of Western nations. That's what's happening here. What you're witnessing is Ukrainian-made drones that are striking deep into Russian territory. Dude, thousands of kilometers. Ukraine has struck thousands of kilometers deep into Russia to go after weapons production facilities, oil facilities, freaking logistics support, trains that are carrying weapons out of North Korea. They're going after those things and they're striking the crap out of them. And it's really putting the squeeze on Russia. And this is without Western-made weapons. And that is the huge argument right now that's taking place is with these Western-made weapons, are we going to allow them to start striking deep into Russia? And what's Russia's stance on that going to be? And again, got great insight from Mr. Scott Ritter. Now, he wanted to sit there and he wanted to pretend like the United States and the West, we don't want nuclear war, and Russia lowered their nuclear threshold. They adjusted their nuclear doctrine last year, and all of this other crap, basically positioning and pontificating about why they are just such a mighty force that should not be messed with. Well, now we know that all of that is garbage. U.S. ended up sending in 2 nuclear subs just a couple of weeks ago off the coast of Russia, right before Putin was supposed to be coming over to Alaska in order to negotiate. Guess what? Didn't get him very far. Eli Johansson, Russia's logistics are crumbling exponentially. You are correct. They are. They're being crushed. Look, if Russia was doing so good with troops, and they're doing so well logistically, why do they have to pull weapons from North Korea? You know, they're often complaining about how the United States and NATO is supporting Ukraine and providing them with weapons and logistics, saying, well, Ukraine would have been crushed if these things didn't happen. Of course, the West had to step in and save them. Okay, well, what's your excuse for pulling crap artillery rounds and crap munitions and crap troops out of North Korea? What's your excuse for doing that if you are so freaking superior? What's your excuse for needing Iran's help if you are so superior? What's your excuse for your ballistic missile launch failures if you are so superior? And you can't claim that these types of things didn't happen when the next day the U.S. ends up launching a freaking Minuteman ballistic missile just to prove a freaking point. After Russia fails to launch theirs, the U.S. then launches a Minuteman ballistic missile showing our capabilities of striking. We don't have little frickin' panels falling off our submarines. Our nuclear subs are in top-notch shape. And last year, when Russia was taking their subs and sailing them off the coast of frickin' Florida and taking them on down to wherever the hell it was in the south, was it Cuba? We ended up seeing that those dang things are falling apart. We end up having like Poseidon's and entire Navy crews that are just tracking these things as they go along, just to embarrass the crap out of Russia. And then Russia gets there and their subs just falling apart. No, United States isn't scared of Russia. Not even close. We might have issues with transgenders and all this other crap going on in our military, but it is still vastly superior to Russia's. I want to take your guys' focus and I want to shift it away from what's taking place over inside of Ukraine and Russia until more information comes out on that. And I want to shift your focus away from that. I want to take you guys over into the Middle East, because what's happening in the Middle East right now is also a pretty dang big deal. Hezbollah was right around, I think it was like over 100,000 strong, 150,000 strong at the start of this whole conflict when they decided it'd be a good idea to go and attack Israel in conjunction with the Houthis and the IRGC and Hamas and everybody else in the region, right? Hezbollah was like 100,000 strong. Since then, after the peace deal that got signed last November, Hezbollah has given up about 80% of the terrain, all right, south of the Litani River. They still occupy about 20 to 25% of it, but they haven't really fully moved out and gone in with that peace agreement. Therefore, Israel still is occupying 5 hilltops around the blue line over near the border, just to make sure that Hezbollah doesn't cross back over. They're not in the middle of major cities or anything like that. But Hezbollah is still setting up, and they're still disobeying the peace agreement that they actually signed to. And here is some more proof. This is Israel conducting strikes over inside of southern Lebanon. They've been doing these for the last couple of weeks. They've been taking out rocket launch sites. They've been taking out several other sites over inside of southern Lebanon that are currently being occupied and used by Hezbollah. Some rockets have been launched since then by Hezbollah, right? But they have been vastly calmed down. And the nice thing about this, when we look at it, is Hezbollah is supposed to be disarming and turning all their weapons and stuff in over to the Lebanese government. And right now, we are seeing signs of actual progress. The Lebanese government is doing what they're supposed to do in order to disarm the largest non-state terror organization in the freaking world. Here inside of this video, you actually see truckloads. Oh, it doesn't want to play now. Of course you want to play that game. Let me fix this. You are seeing truckloads of Palestinian weapons. All right, well, it's not playing right now. Truckloads of Palestinian weapons that have been trucked and taken over by the Lebanese, right? They have also started getting like Palestinian weapons and frickin' Hezbollah controlled weapons and things like that. And they're going over and they're turning them in. And this is happening at like a pretty big rate. And that includes the Palestinians and everybody else. Matt, talk about escalation in Venezuela. We might agree on that. Dude, if there was actual reliable information that was coming out of what's taking place over there, I'd be happy to tell you that. But I can tell you that we're not invading Venezuela with just 2,000 Marines. That's freaking stupidity. If we were going to go invade Venezuela, we would own that place until we got done with it. All right. So there's much more, all right, to go. Right now, over inside of Venezuela, what you actually have is you have U.S. Navy vessels that are floating off in international water to interdict drugs. And then you have Maduro and his dudes, all right, that have mobilized and all this other crap, and they're sending out their little freaking boats to go over and do what? Protect waters that the Navy's not going in, and it's posturing. Venezuela's so weak, it actually had to hand out weapons to local nationals in case the United States decides to invade. I saw a report yesterday, completely, totally unfounded, no information whatsoever, saying that the United States is about to invade Venezuela. Haven't seen it yet, haven't seen the evidence of it. None. What's taking place is you have naval vessels that are interdicting. They are out there in order to interdict drug trafficking that's coming out of there. And they're floating in international water. Now, could it spark an international incident? Absolutely, it could spark an international incident. But the deal is that it would require them to come over, and I'm saying Venezuela to come out and state that the United States ended up attacking their vessels in international waters. And how dare we? Right? That we're attacking their vessels. And then the United States is going to come out and they're going to go, look at all of this crap we just pulled off these boats. Look at these international crimes that Venezuela is committing, and they just admitted that those are their vessels. With the current stance in the United States when it goes to the war on drugs and how many people are dying here in the United States because of those drugs, do you really think the American population wouldn't say screw Venezuela? They might be upset if we get involved in another conflict. They're going to be upset if more U.S. service members end up getting killed overseas. But at the end of the day, on a daily basis here in the United States of America, we have so many people dying from frickin' overdoses, fentanyl, and everything else. It's a problem. All right? It is a problem, and that is exactly why the cartels were designated FTOs. And the United States government is doing something about it, whether people like it or not. Now, if the Venezuelans decide that it's a good idea to admit that the boats that we interdict belong to them and we're doing so in international waters and they're breaking international law, have at it, boss. Because then we're just going to open up carte blanche, dude. You think those freaking U.S. Navy destroyers that are over there are a joke? No. You think those U.S. Marines are a joke? No. Those Marines are waiting to kill anybody. They don't even give a shit who they kill. They just want to kill people, man. I don't know if you've ever met any Marines, but they don't care. They're like, oh, an excuse to kill people? Cool. Yeah, let's go kill them. They don't give two craps. Some of them do. I mean, this is like, 2025, so maybe there is some of them out there that do, but by and large, they don't. You know what I mean? You tell me like Venezuelans are just sitting there chomping at the bit, being like, I don't care who we got to kill. You let me know. Like, we'll get in there, dude. They're going to get crushed. Absolutely freaking crushed. Israel conducted a landing on a former air defense base in southern Damascus, according to sources. This went down yesterday, and it was following a bunch of airstrikes that took place over inside of Syria. Now, this is kind of a big deal because the United States had partnered up, well, I don't want to say partnered up, but softened up a little bit to al-Jilani after he ended up overthrowing the Assad regime. And of course, Assad flees over into Russia. Why wouldn't he, right? Israel decided it'd be a good idea to go and conduct this landing over there. And it wasn't even a landing, actually. I'm hearing that it was 4 helicopters that actually flew over top of this site following airstrikes. So they softened up the targets with airstrikes, which you guys are about to see. Ended up softening up the target with airstrikes and then flew 4 helicopters over, in which commandos ended up like parachuting out of down onto the freaking ground, raiding this place, killing God only knows how many freaking, Syrian army, soldiers and stuff. This is what the skyline looked like last night as all of this was taking place. And I say last night local time, so now it's like the following evening, right? Like getting into the following afternoon to evening over there. But look at this. So the first thing to come out was like news of all of these airstrikes that were taking place. And they're like, why is Israel doing this? Why is Israel conducting airstrikes over inside of Syria? Well, it's kind of obvious why Israel's conducting airstrikes over inside of Syria, because we'll get there in a second. I hope you guys see all that stuff that's going on in the sky right there. What you're actually seeing is like anti-aircraft fire and things like that that are like going up and exploding in the sky, trying to take out whatever the hell it is, trying to shoot down whatever bombs, cruise missiles, whatever the hell it was Israel ended up sending their way to end up just like softening up that objective before they went in. All of this took place the day following, right? Multiple freaking strikes that took place again outside of the presidential complex, okay, over inside of Syria. And that is Israel that's warning them that they have intel and that they can take care of these things. Now, what's so significant about these strikes? Like, seriously, nope, got to turn that down. What is so significant about these strikes, and why is it so significant? Because love the team up with Valhalla, de Oppressor Liber. Oh, thanks, Rusty. Appreciate you, man. Do well. Why is this so significant? Because the United States and the West are trying to back Jelani, and Israel saying absolutely not. Now, one of the nations that's actually backing Jelani is Turkey. And what Israel came out today claiming is that when they conducted this raid, by the way, they ended up ripping a bunch of equipment and intel and everything like that off this military site. This is what they actually went after, a Syrian army freaking military site. If you're going to call it the army right now, it's just all Jelani's men. And I've got a whole breakdown of the terrorists that are actually in charge of the Syrian military, if you guys want to see that later. It's Turkey's intelligence equipment that was being used to spy on Israel. That's what Israel is now saying. This is Turkey was supplying intelligence equipment over there, and that they were using it to spy on Israel, i.e. Turkey was helping out Syria and gathering intel on Israel. And you got to remember that down in the south, you ended up having that whole situation with the Druze going on like throughout this summer. And it's still a massive concern. Israel is trying to work to have a humanitarian corridor, about 40 clicks worth, opened up going from the Golan Heights up over down into the south up to where like the Druze are at. And this equipment that Israel had gone in, conducted a raid successfully and got the hell out of there, that equipment was likely going to be used in order to, how do I want to say, exploit that situation and maybe target the Israelis. Here's some of those strikes actually occurring over there prior to that landing, prior to the operation taking place. Bizzler coming in, becoming a true supporter. Good to have you, man. Thank you. Check that out. Boom. Gotta love it, man. So not a lot of information is actually coming out on this operation. I'm assuming we're going to get some more throughout the day as all of this continues on, and I really hope we do. First thing I want to bring your attention to is this. This is something that, I had brought up and I had talked to you guys and I said, look, the Nasser hospital definitely being used by Hamas. Earlier this week, when we had like 2 tank rounds strike the Nasser hospital, it pissed everybody off because they claimed X amount of civilians were killed and so on and so forth. And then it comes out that you actually had 6 known Hamas terrorists that ended up getting killed in that strike. 6, not 1, not 2, 6. 6 known Hamas terrorists that ended up getting killed inside of that strike. Ended up getting this breakdown sent over to me this morning by, I'm gonna blow him up because he did an awesome job. All right, Ben Tizone Mockles. You guys, if you like OSINT freaking like intelligent type stuff when it goes down to having things actually like geolocated and done very, very well, y'all need to go follow this guy if you're into that type of thing, particularly about like this Israeli conflict. But I'm going to open this up. First thing he does is he provides this video. This video ended up coming out not that long ago, earlier this month. Okay. You guys need to watch this video. After you watch this video, we're going to talk about this video and why it's important to knowing that Hamas is actually located inside of that hospital. It's freaking nuts. By the way, I almost want to run a poll on the average age you guys think these legs belong to. Part of me says that the average age on these legs is somewhere in the low teens, but who knows? That's just a conspiracy theory, right? Now, what you're witnessing right here, all right, is some HD camera footage and a very well-produced video from a vantage point. Somebody says 14. I'm glad I'm not the only one that was like, you know what? Those hands and those legs that are being shown in that video, they look pretty dang young. I see 15, 16. Mary says 18. Maybe. I mean, there's not even hair on those dang legs, man. Like, puberty has yet to strike. Puberty has yet to strike. Think about that. No hairy arms, no hairy legs, no hair anywhere. And this isn't like the Arabic saying kus mahalus, right? Like they're not over there shaving all of their little freaking parts right now. That's just not going on. But I want you guys to observe what's in this video right here. All right. Back it up. And what we're going to pay attention to is we're going to pay attention to some pretty good landmarks. Now, it's very clear that this video is steady, right? This is stabilized. This is stabilized video. Now, if you take like a shaky video and you go and you stabilize it, you lose a lot of quality as you're doing that because it's essentially, like AI that's balancing this freaking video out. And it's filling in a lot of gaps because the video is shaky. We don't see that here. What we actually see when you pay attention to this camera system is this thing's out here. Let me go back. You actually see this camera tracking. Wait for it. You see this camera tracking very, very well. It's stable. Tracking, zooming in. Tracking. You guys see that? See how it just pans over like that? all robotic-like. See how it's panning robotic-like? Now, why do you think that is? You get stable shots like this at a distance when you have a HD camera set up on a tripod and knowing where it's at. But the other thing that this video ended up doing was giving away some really crucial landmarks. And we're going to take a look at these landmarks. We're going to talk about this building right here. We're going to talk about this building right here. And we're going to talk about this water tower. All three of these are very important landmarks because they don't move. All right. One of them is, I guess, like the Israeli building that was being occupied over in that area has been like they've abandoned or destroyed it, whatever. But those major landmarks, those suckers don't move, and they're located on a map. And using that, you can actually use a old military tactic for land navigation called resection to figure out where this video likely was being shot from. Because one, it's in an elevated position. That's very clear. Gaza is relatively flat. So this video, to overlook all of this stuff, has to come from an elevated position. So that's number one. Number two, this video, before everything sparks off, you guys can see, is being shot, all right, in the general direction, right, that there is a clear line of sight from this water tower, this building, and this building. All three of those. And what that does is that gives you an azimuth to know directly, right, a back azimuth, if you will, to where that's coming from. So if I was able to take a map and put it down and plot a frickin' line that ends up going straight in between those things, well, we can generally assess where this camera is actually being shot from. Take a look at that. It's a nice wide angle that they're able to pan out and view, right? So we can take a look at that and say, this camera is looking directly in between those buildings. I hope you guys are tracking with everything that I'm telling you, because when we take that and we put it on a map, guess what? Here you have those different frickin' buildings. You have a house, you have a flour mill, and you have the water tower in the background. And they appear just like they do on this map. Whoa, 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 whoa. What is this volume that's playing now? Freaking ridiculous. There it is. I found it. No, I didn't tell you to play that volume. Thank you. It plots a line. Like, I swear I have freaking demons in this computer sometimes, man. Like, random stuff just starts playing when I don't tell it to. Here you have a direct line, right? And look at how freaking tied up and close that is in order to make it happen. Here's that water tower that was seen in the background. Here is the flour mill that was seen on the left side of the screen. And here is the house that was seen on the right side of the screen. And if you do direct line of sight from the tower, shooting an azimuth directly between those two things, guess what it leads back to? It intersects perfectly with the Nasser Hospital. Are you guys tracking what I'm telling you? And that Nasser Hospital is in an elevated position. That camera was on a tripod. It did appear to be camouflaged. And if you guys remember from the original strike video, which I can pull up, what you don't hear is the actual tank firing. That tank was far away when it ended up shooting that round, or those two rounds. I remember that being one of the key things that I was thinking. Like, this wasn't the IDF operating within a couple blocks and just blasting a freaking round straight into the Nasser Hospital. It was particular, and it was struck for a very good reason. And now that you have that, let's go back and look. Again, where's that nice screenshot? Oh, stop it. Go back to where you knuckleheads showed us that. Building 1, building 2, this is the flour mill, and there's the tower. And there is your direct azimuth that shows that this camera was in line going straight through it. Straight through it. That Nasser Hospital, perfect location. So now, not only do we have evidence that they were filming from that location, and that the film was being used by Hamas for this particular operation, we have direct evidence that Hamas was there. This is so damning, it's not even funny. Hamas, 100%, when you take it and you put the facts and you lay them down on a map, undeniable, was using that location. That is your elevated space. And it goes directly in line with the freaking Nasser Hospital. All be damned. I told you guys, it's just going to take a little bit, and information's going to come out. And as soon as that information comes out, it's going to be very, very clear what ended up happening. So yeah, they were using that location. They were spotting Israelis, and they were using it for freaking intelligence operations, and they were blasting out freaking propaganda videos. Now it makes sense why you have journalists that are there, because the Hamas journalists obviously are operating freaking cameras. They are producing videos. They're doing those things. I've been stating this for a while, that they have professionally produced videos, meaning they have people that are within that industry that are actually conducting and doing those things, and they're using the cover of the hospital, and they're using the cover of being media in order to make it seem like they weren't actually there. Houthis, man, gotta love those bastards.
نحن أبناء الشعب اليمني قد نقبل أن نعيش تحت القصف وتحت الحصار حتى عقود من الزمن، لكننا غير مستعدين أن نعيش بلا كرامة ولو ساعة واحدة.
إذا كنتم تنوون فعلا محاربة إسرائيل، لماذا تطلقون صاروخ كل عدة أيام؟ حاربوها بكل قوتكم، يعني أثخنوهم طالما خلاص بدأتم حرب حقيقية على سوريا وأنتم مستمرون، وهذا ما نراه للحقيقة طيلة الشهور الماضية. خلاص يعني شنوا حرب قوية وحقيقية على إسرائيل وليس صاروخ كل عدة أيام يعني.
يفتحوا لنا الحدود، لأنه إمكانيات اليمن العسكرية بالمقارنة بما لدى الأمريكي والبريطاني الذي يدعم الكيان الصهيوني بكافة أنواع الأسلحة، ما لدى اليمن هو لا شيء بالمقارنة بما يمتلكه العدو. ولكن هناك إمكانيات كبيرة لدى العرب والمسلمين، وللأسف الشديد لا زالوا يوظفون تلك الأسلحة وتلك الأموال للوقوف إلى جانب الكيان الصهيوني. والجميع يعرف أن هناك دول عربية قد اعترضت صواريخنا وطائراتنا، كما سبب واعترضت الصواريخ والطائرات الإيرانية. أيضا لا زالوا يفرضون حصارا على اليمن، وأيضا لم ينهوا العدوان الذي تم شنه في عام.
He continues to go on and state that the only reason Israel doesn't have more destruction inside Gaza is thanks to the Houthis. Well, they can think that all they want. And I just seen it down inside the chat. You guys said that Israel ended up taking out senior leadership of the Houthis over inside of Sana'a. Looking for that information right now. I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on it to tell you guys exactly what ended up taking place. If you guys are over on X, feel free to tag me in anything right now. You guys obviously can see my X account down in, where is it? The bottom of the screen right here. All right, you guys can go over and you can take a look at that. Right. And you can freaking tag me in anything that's relevant that might say that, you know, Israel is bombing the Houthis right now and taking out their senior leadership over inside of Yemen. So if that's the case, great. Because the Houthis, number one, have been targeting Israel. They fired a ballistic missile at them the other day, and they obviously haven't learned their lesson yet. So while I'm looking for that stuff and bringing up the Houthis being fired upon and their leadership being knocked out again, all right, I actually want to bring something else to your attention, that Israel ended up coming out and stating, it wasn't just Israel, Kogat, that they're about to open 2 new humanitarian aid distribution sites over inside of Gaza. Yes, you heard that right. 2 new humanitarian aid distro sites over inside of Gaza. So good on them for making this happen. Saying that they're delivering over 2 million meals weekly inside of Gaza. They're crushing it. And GHF isn't going anywhere, despite how much that might anger a lot of people, such as Anthony Aguilar. GHF ain't going nowhere. They're actually ramping up operations and they're opening up new sites. And I have a feeling that these are going to be just a couple of their new distribution sites, and that there's going to be more coming out on the record. What you're seeing is them like digging in and actually making these things freaking happen. Israel also came out with information directly against the, how do I want to say this? Directly
is 188.
Directly against the IPC, saying that there's famine taking place over there. And they ended up putting this freaking video out, and I think they did a really, really good job. And I'd like you guys to take a listen to this thing while I go dig up some information on what just occurred over inside of Sana'a and the senior leadership of the Houthis that ended up getting taken out. But here's Israel telling you that the IPC ended up cooking up information. And one of the guys that was actually responsible for drafting this garbage, according to Israel, was putting out anti-Semitic posts online following October 7th. Imagine that.
Evidence with data, hid contradicting data, and ignore contradicting data. On each claim, I will put just one sharp, clear evidence. With regard to the made-up data, data that doesn't exist is added to that report. First example, Hamas reports about 6 cases of death every day in Gaza, while the IPC standard in order to declare famine is 188. They are missing 182 cases of death daily, even when it's based on Hamas data. What IPC did in its report? Added a virtual additional 182 death cases a day, just to meet the threshold in order to come to the prefabricated conclusion of famine.
My favorite part here in a little bit, because this guy is a little bit dry, is he actually goes a little bit deeper. And what he ends up saying is that they conducted 2 different surveys over within the region. One of the surveys actually fell below the threshold, and they didn't like that answer. They didn't like the threshold that famine wasn't being met. And so what they did was they conducted another survey, and then they chose to leave that survey out of their actual report on the information because famine wasn't actually occurring, which is freaking wild. He also said that the number of deaths is grossly out of control. 6 deaths a day. IPC ended up adding 182 deaths to meet their threshold for famine. He even goes a little bit further after all of that stuff, and he goes out and he throws this dude under the bus. I'm waiting for it. I might have skipped over top of it. I'll have to give the guy's information out. There he is, right there. Author's political motivation. All right, so he is an author of this freaking crap. The post that he ends up having up on X, dated November 2nd of 23 at 11:51 a.m. Again, a key author, Andy Seal. Hamas, the de facto government of Gaza, has to go because of extreme rhetoric and war crimes. Under that criteria, the Israeli government would also have to be removed. Not helpful. Biden has to radically move to be a realistic peace plan and to impose a ceasefire. Nobody else can. So this guy, all the way back then, was bringing up a ceasefire and blah, 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 blah. Too bad that what that guy was actually putting out seems to be like a bunch of misconstrued data. Now, allegedly, what ended up happening over inside of Syria is you had several senior members of the Houthis that were starting to gather, all right? And they were taking these different meetings in several different locations. And within a matter of minutes, Israel ended up conducting numerous different strikes over inside of Yemen in the city of Sana'a, which would be, I believe, the capital, and taking these guys out. So it appears to be a coordinated strike done by Israel to knock out the senior leadership of the Houthis. And again, they just came out and said that they're going to open up basically all-out war on frickin' Israel, right? So good on them. Way to go. Ladies and gentlemen, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you guys like unbiased, well, quasi-unbiased when it comes to terrorism, but if you like good, solid information about what's taking place around the world, here in the United States, whatever, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Peace, love, happiness, and God bless, ladies and gentlemen. I'm out of here.